Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. This is a workshop that is sponsored by the Active Learning Academy. One of our Active Learning Academy teams is facilitating today. Their topic is examining active collaborative learning in online classes. And we just want to, ahead of time, thank you all so much for putting together this workshop for us. I'm going to hand it over to you now for introductions and to start your workshop. Thank you.
So welcome everyone. If you have not already typed a word that comes to mind when you think of utilizing group work as an instructor, we encourage you to put that in the chat. You can put more than one word. We have quite a few already, but if you'd like to add anything, please feel free and then we'll move on. Okay, from the group chat, we have a lot of positives here. We have growth, learning, teamwork, collaborative, life lessons, shared responsibility, but we also have some negatives: awkward, disappearing students, and troublesome. And this mirrors what students have to say largely. So Tanya, if you'll put up the next slide. So this is the student perspective that we've gathered from our courses. The larger the responses, the larger the word here is here. So you see fun, teamwork, collaborative, communication. So all good things, except for in smaller things, we have annoying, hard, different things like that. So we hope today that we will minimize the negatives and improve these positive words. So I'll go ahead and turn this over now to Sam.
Hi, everyone. We wanted to start out just by giving a little bit of context about the workshop that we have prepared today, just to kind of give you an idea of why we were covering this specific topic. So I think that most of us here probably already engage in collaborative active learning. Many of us probably understand that these student-centered pedagogies, they engage our students, they help them connect to their classmates, to their instructors, and really to the university community as a whole. Most of us, however, are well versed in implementing these strategies in the traditional face-to-face classroom. We know that active learning lends itself very well to being in person and having students interact with each other. But since we've gone online and a lot of us are now teaching online, it's more challenging. So some of the strategies and the group work that we can do in our face-to-face classes has become a little bit more challenging in the current environment. Some of those reasons could be, a lack of understanding of how to facilitate group work online, fear of having extra work that's involved in managing those online group activities, that can be challenging as well. And so with this context in mind, next slide, please, Tanya. We are going to tell you a little bit today about what we've been working on over the last year or so, where we have been trying to understand the best ways to facilitate and to sort of coordinate these active collaborative learning in our online classes. And so we'll start with our introductions now. So my name is Sam Rogers. I'm from the Department of Biological Sciences.
I'm Bryce Van Doren. I'm from the Department of Public Health Sciences, and I also work with the Advanced Faculty Affairs and Diversity Office.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Eric Biker. I am in the Cato College of Education.
Hi everyone, I'm Harini Ramaprasad. I'm in the College of Computing and Informatics in the Department of Computer Science.
Hello everyone, my name is Tanya Bates. I'm in the Department of Biological Sciences in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. And we want to get started with an acknowledgement. So the work that we've done here was funded by a grant that we received from the Center for Teaching and Learning and the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning grant application. So we just wanted to start with what we're calling our meet cute, how we met. So this group, how we get together, a very diverse group. We met as part of the Active Learning Academy in 2019 and decided to work together to submit that Scholarship of Teaching and Learning or SOTL grant on active collaborative learning in 2020. We received the grant and proceeded to collect data from 175 undergraduate participants from different colleges, from the Cato College of Education, from College of Computing and Informatics, and of course, the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. And we are participating again in the Active Learning Academy, this cohort, which is why we're here with you today. So thank you for joining us. So these are our research questions for the study that we are still collecting data for. We wanted to see if scaffolding of these student-centered learning activities within groups would promote student success. We wanted to know what impact reflection would have on the participants' perceptions of that active collaborative experience. We wanted to do self and peer assessment to see how the participants' perceptions of the active collaborative learning experience was. And we wanted to determine if the active collaborative group work in the online class would increase the participants' sense of belonging. We also wanted to see if the findings would be similar between different sections and between the various disciplines that we all represent. So while this project started in online courses, we've now implemented some of the ideas that we uncovered during this project in our face-to-face courses as well. So we hope you'll be able to find lots of things that you can utilize today. During this workshop, we're going to demonstrate strategies and discuss strategies and high impact practices to facilitate these active collaborative learning experiences that we have mentioned. So as you will hear, collaborative learning can be implemented in classes of various sizes, different levels, different modalities, different disciplines. And by the end of the workshop, we'd like to have you identify at least one strategy that you'll be able to implement in your courses. So we're going to start with how we establish student groups and talk a little bit about how we did this. So when you're establishing student groups, you need to be aware that the groups can obviously impact student success. It can impact students' feelings of belonging and lots of other things. There are lots of considerations. It's not a one size fits all. So you're going to hear from different folks on how they establish their groups. Things to consider while you're establishing groups. What are your populations? Are they graduate students versus undergraduates? Are they majors versus non-majors? Do you have a diverse population versus not diverse? What year are the students? Are they first year? Are they seniors? What's the duration of the groups? Is it going to be for short-term assignments, or are you going to establish groups for long-term, for the whole semester? And then what type of assignments will be using the groups with? Will it be low stakes versus high stakes? And then how will the students be selected into the group? Will it be self-selection or will it be instructor assigned? And then, of course, what's the modality of the class? Is it synchronous? Is it asynchronous? Is it online? Is it face-to-face? So we're going to tell you about how we established groups. And so we're going to start with Biology 1110, which is the course that Sam and I teach. This is a large enrollment, so greater than 150 students per section, introductory biology course with a diverse student population. And in our course, we ask students to complete a graded discussion post so that they will talk about their major, what interests them about biology, what their working style is, as well as their preferred time of day to work. So we wanted to ask them things like, what's your preferred time of day to work, in case they had conflicts, right, with other classes or with things that they had outside of school. Students could then self-sign up for groups based on this initial discussion post. And we really decided to let students self-select because they were going to be in this group all semester working on activities as well as working on a project in the course. And it's a first-year course, so we felt it was important for students to be able to self-select to find a group that they would be comfortable in all semester. And we'll tell you about how we navigated the entire semester with the students in groups. So I'm going to pass this over to my colleague who's going to tell you about how they establish groups in his course.
Thank you, Tanya. Appreciate that. So my course is a little different, LED 3223. The students who are taking the course are in their junior year, and they're part of a cohort in the elementary education teacher certificate program. And so they already kind of know each other. They have some familiarity with one another. Of course, when I implemented this in the last spring, it's a little different doing it in sort of that online synchronous environment or hybrid environment. But the way that I would organize the groups was through the assignment description. So they would first read over the entire assignment description, post to a discussion board to confirm that they've read the assignment, they share any questions they may have about the assignment, and then they actually complete in that discussion board too, what are their choices in terms of the assignment, whatever the assignment content is about, what kind of choices do they have in terms of, or what are their top 5 choices in terms of the direction for where they take the assignment, as well as identifying the names of people in the class who they'd like to be in a group with. So there's a lot of choice involved, and also self-selecting some of the content as well as their groups. And from there I go, and once they have made that identification of that information, I put them in groups according to what they've shared on the discussion board. And now I'd like to hand it over to Harini to talk a little bit more about how she establishes groups.
Thank you so much, Eric. So I'll talk a little bit about the way I establish groups in my ITCS 6112 class. This is a graduate course in the College of Computing and Informatics. It typically has 50 to 70 students. This semester I think I have 51. And this semester I'm teaching the classes in an asynchronous online mode. This class, it's mostly computer science majors, and most of them have an undergraduate degree in computer science as well, although we occasionally get some students who are in the computer science master's program, but they have an undergraduate degree in a different discipline. In this course, I have 2 kinds of groups that I use. I create what I call activity teams for students to work on low to medium stakes activities. And I'll talk a little bit more about the types of activities later in this presentation. For these activity teams, there's actually no requirement for synchronous meetings, and there's also no specific background skills or knowledge that they need. It's really just activities that are directly based on the content that is taught in the course itself. So for these activities, I randomly assign students to groups of 3 or 4, just using Canvas. I also have project teams. These are high stakes teams, and for these, I send a survey to all my students where they're asked different questions. They're asked about their availability for synchronous meetings, and of course I try to group people with similar availability together. I also ask questions about their programming language preference and group students with similar preferences. I also ask about their familiarity with certain concepts, tools, and technologies that are relevant to the project. And in this case, I try to group students that are dissimilar so that they can each bring their unique perspectives and their experiences to the project. So these, again, like I said, are for high stakes activities. So while they're assigned, they are assigned based on student input through these surveys. And now I will pass it on to... Oh, actually, no, I'm going to continue talking. So the next thing, the main idea is we want to make sure that we're setting our students up for success, right? So the first thing is we want to make sure we give them enough tools and guidelines for collaboration, because if it's, especially in an online class, if you just throw students in groups together but don't give them any information or guidelines on how to work, they may end up being frustrated with group work, and because of that, they won't succeed in the class. We'll first talk a little bit about some tips for effective group work. So students may not know how to collaborate effectively in a group, and for each of our classes, we provided specific tips and guidelines. On the right here, you see an example for Biology 1110, and the rest of us did something similar in our courses, and we customized them as needed for our own courses. So here you see we're talking about things like start group work early and how to manage your time, how to communicate with your group members, and even possible tools that they could use for communication. And then the importance of setting up regular meeting times, again, if that is relevant. If your group work is supposed to be synchronous, then the importance of setting up regular meeting times, and the importance of deciding who does what. So how do you manage the division of tasks among group members, etc. And then Tanya, if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Um, so now, to go a step further, we can also talk more about the kinds of tools that they can use for group work. So depending on the types of group activities that you have and depending on the mode, as in is it synchronous versus asynchronous, you could recommend other collaborative tools. For example, in my 6112 class, I actually recommend that my students use an online whiteboarding tool called Miro. On the right here, you see a little screenshot from one of my students' Miro board. And basically there's you can create post-it notes, students can comment on each other's post-it notes, they can create little screen mock-ups, which is relevant to my course. They can obviously write notes. They have a chat feature right there in Miro that they can use to communicate with each other. And this tool is actually great for both synchronous and asynchronous collaboration. Now, the other advantage of Miro is that
Hello?
it provides me, the instructor, an opportunity to go into students' groups and actually see their Miro board and give them feedback right then. Next slide, please. Okay, and going further along these lines, it's a good idea to set up some kind of initial group activity that students can use to get to know their group members and think through how are they going to really work together in their group. The example that you see here is a group logistics worksheet from Biology 1110, where students are first being asked to introduce themselves, to get to know each other, and you can include some ideas for conversation starters right there in the logistics worksheet, and then have the students discuss and decide how they're going to meet. What tool will they use to meet? You can provide some different options. Here you see WebEx, Zoom, Skype, etc., but really leave the choice up to them to decide what they want to use. So how often will they meet, when will they meet, and how will they make sure that their meeting times align with the course activity deadlines and so on. It's also a good idea for students within a group to try to understand each other's working style, right? Some students may like to work early and get everything done well ahead of the deadline. Other students may work very close to the deadline. So understanding this about each other could help them prod each other when needed, right? So that the work eventually gets done. And also deciding on who will be responsible for submitting the final work for some specific activity. Will it be one person that's doing it throughout the semester, or will they rotate among themselves? Or you as the instructor could even assign a group leader. You can do this even on Canvas, for instance, and you could keep the same group leader through the semester or rotate them out every few weeks. And then finally, there's also the important thing, they should think about what they'll do and come to some sort of agreement on what they will do if someone is not contributing to the group. Will they try to talk to their teammates and figure out what to do? Will they come to you, the instructor? What might be the consequences and so on? And also, sometimes there are changes to groups. You may have students withdraw from your course and you end up with a group with just 2 students. Maybe you want to add them to a different group. So it's a good idea to ask group members to think about how they will integrate a new team member and how they will welcome them to the group, etc. Next slide, please. All right, so I'll hand it over to Eric.
Yes. Setting up students for success in groups happens at the beginning, as Harini was outlining different ways that we, and the strategies that we included as part of this helping to set them up for success, but it also needs to be sustained and structured throughout the course. And so we wanted to talk a little bit more about how we sustain that success for the students in the weekly structure, as well as providing intermediate deadlines. You can see in this slide, and I'm not going to go through all of the different points in each course, but you can see that each of us did that in different ways depending on the goals and objectives of our course. In terms of weekly structure, students can struggle with time management. especially in online environments or in hybrid kind of learning environments. They tend to work very close to deadlines, and it can make group work frustrating for other students and even ineffective when that happens. So providing these intermediate deadlines is a way of scaffolding assignments and also providing support along the way. We built this into each of our courses in terms of the group projects that we assign, having consistent intermediate deadlines throughout either a week or throughout the project timeline, whether that was a couple weeks long or throughout the whole semester, was common throughout our coursework. And this is all done in order to scaffold the student's success by providing still structure, and these deadlines provide that kind of structure in keeping students accountable to these deadlines, but also allowing for some flexibility, especially in an asynchronous online class. So having something like a jobs checklist where students are signing up for different roles or responsibilities on a Google Doc related to that group project, and then they're going through and actually checking that off. That's just one of the ways to build in the intermediate deadlines and to scaffold the assignments, the group assignments. Now we want to share, if you can go to the next slide, please. Now we want to share about some of the group activities that we included in our coursework and examples of these group activities. If you can go to the next slide. As we're getting ready to share these different group activities, I think it's important to just think about when to use group work. And we recognize that there are a lot of learning benefits to group work. We have found that as part of our research that we did into our collaborative efforts, that there were a lot of ways that students reported they felt closer to establishing a learning community in the classroom, and there were a lot of benefits. But simply assigning group work is no guarantee that these goals will be achieved, or you will find benefits. In fact, group projects can, and they often do, backfire when they're not designed thoughtfully and provided structure and supervision, as well as the inclusion of some sort of self-assessment or reflection in order to promote meaningful teamwork and deeper collaboration. So it's really important to be thoughtful about when to use group work, and just here are some considerations that we'd like to offer everyone online here. Using group work, it should be meaningful, of course, and useful for students, something that they can apply to their future practice. And so in our examples, we try to show how they can make applications to their future practice. It should be collaborative, discussion-based. There should be some problem solving built in where diverse perspectives are needed and valued. And it should be for the development of relevant skills towards either future coursework or future career. If you could go to the next slide, please. I want to share some examples from my course, LED 3223, which again is for teacher candidates. All of these group activities are things that they could use in their future teaching in elementary schools. So one example is a micro-teaching assignment where they demonstrate and model a teaching strategy, and they do that together, creating a presentation about the teaching strategy, but also a demonstration where they get the rest of the class involved. Online, this is not impossible. It just requires facilitating that over Zoom, like we kind of all learned how to do very quickly throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. Another group work assignment is the equitable quantitative data analysis assignment. And this is where I had my students examine and analyze data from the Civil Rights Data Collection from the United States Department of Education. They had to examine data, district-wide data from school districts in North Carolina, as well as school-specific data, and look at the disparities in the data across race, gender, etc., and be able to make recommendations about how in their future teaching practice, through a culturally responsive and equitable educational lens, to be able to make suggestions about ways to address those disparities. And then the final project was Global Competencies Virtual Odyssey assignment, which is a little bit like a virtual field trip. I'd like to say it's much more than just a virtual field trip, because students are connecting, they're creating an interactive multimedia presentation, engaging kind of presentation that they could use in their future teaching, but also connecting that with a piece of children's literature to make it integrated. And it's about a country or people group from a certain region of the world. When I did this last spring, it was on sub-Saharan Africa. And in this current semester, I'm doing the region of Latin America. So those are the examples. In my class, I'd like to turn it over to my colleagues, our colleague Harini now, to share her examples.
Thanks, Eric. So in 6112, as I mentioned earlier, this is a software systems design and implementation course. As I teach students about the different aspects of this course, be it, so software engineering will have requirements, and then how to design a piece of software, how to implement it, how to test it, and so on. For each of these, I have them do low to medium stakes activities where they apply what they've learned in that module to a very simple case study. And then these activities are a good way for them to practice those skills and those concepts, the application of those concepts, and then take them over and apply them to their project where they're developing a more complicated, full-fledged software application. And having them do these activities in groups is reflective of how this actually works in the software industry as well. Most of these types of activities would be done in a group. So some example activities, I have a lot. I've just chosen 3 representative examples. The first one there says, write user stories and acceptance criteria for a software application. So here I give them a very broad, high-level vision for a software application and very simple case study, and ask them to brainstorm and come up with specific features and and then how those features would look, what the screens would look like, etc. Come up with the requirements for that software application, essentially. And then their second activity could be to take a given set of requirements for a software and figure out how would you actually design this piece of software. What is the object-oriented design for the software? So that's another example. And there's other activities in which they are given a broad application context and they have to brainstorm and discuss different design patterns. Design patterns are essentially just different tried and tested ways of designing software to meet specific requirements. And so they're discussing what types of design patterns might be applicable in a given context and why. And then as an instructor, I can step in and follow up with them and say, okay, yes, this application makes sense and this other one may not be that suitable here, and explain the reasons why, because a lot of this is very subjective. So having an opportunity to discuss these with their groups and then get some follow-up from me is useful. All right, I will hand it over to Sam.
All right, so to wrap up our group activity examples for 1110 for Tanya and I both, our learning objectives in this course are skills-based. So our group activities, what we'd really like to give our students the opportunity to do here is practice some of those skills that we want them to take away from the course. They do also reinforce some of the lecture topics that we're covering, but really we want them to be able to do things like analyze scientific data, which you see in the first little computer screen here. So we'll have them look at data from different websites about different diseases or different things that we're learning about during the class. A lot of our activities are discussion based, and like Eric mentioned earlier, they do benefit from having diverse perspectives, different students offering, their different ideas. For example, we have a scientific literacy project. We have them talk about things like climate change, calculating their carbon footprints. All of that is, these lend itself well to working within a group. Like we mentioned earlier, we really want to make sure that, to avoid some of those sort of more negative things that you guys were putting in the chat, if you make the group activity something that they recognize, it's benefiting them to work in a group to do this particular assignment. You're going to kind of get rid of some of that hesitancy or some of that negative connotation that kind of surrounds the idea of group work. Next slide, please. We also wanted to tell you a little bit about how we as the instructors can help to facilitate, to assess, supervise some of these group activities that our students do. So it's really dependent, again, on the type of course that you teach. Again, for Tanya and I, we have a really large class. We have 150 students per section, and we often teach more than one. But you may teach a smaller, higher level course, 3,000 or 4,000 level, or, like in Harini's example, she's teaching graduate students. But really what we also want to do is make sure that the group work is accomplishing the goals and the objectives that we want it to. And so that's where student reflections and instructor feedback comes into play. Next slide, please. So what we do in 1110 specifically is that after each week where our students do their group activity, they have a survey on Canvas that they have to complete. And so what this survey does for us is it gives the chance for the students to communicate with the instructor. They can ask questions in this survey. We give them the opportunity to do that. It's kind of like they have the opportunity to talk with us informally. But then they also have the chance to give us feedback on the activity for that week, the group activity, what the dynamics were like. Was there someone who didn't participate? Did they feel like someone wasn't pulling their weight? So it's a good way for us to kind of monitor and make sure that the groups are running smoothly. It also gives us a chance as the instructor to communicate back to the student. So we can give them feedback based on what they tell us in the reflection. So for example, if they say that they're having trouble setting up a time to meet, for a particular week, we can remind them of some of those guidelines that we showed you in the beginning. We can give them, tips for improving their communication. Maybe they need some ideas of additional tools that they can use. Sometimes they come to us in these surveys and they, tell us other things that's not necessarily about the group work, but that can also affect their success in the course. So we might give them individualized referrals for things like CAPS or the food pantry or whatever it is that they need from us for that week. So it's a great way, especially if you have, a larger class, or even if you have a smaller one, this is probably much easier, but it's a great way for us to monitor what's going on within all of our different groups. And so next slide, please. These are some example reflection survey questions that Tanya and I asked in Biology 1110. So we asked them how they met that week, what particular tool did they use? Was everyone there? Did you feel like everyone contributed to the completion of the assignment? And then of course we asked them a few things. How are you doing today? What's the most important thing you learned? We want to make sure that they're realizing the value in what we're having them do. And then the last question is sort of open-ended. Do you have any comments you'd like to share with me? And then for us, since we have such a large class, we do have these set up as Canvas surveys that are automatically graded. So when the students complete them, they are just automatically given full credit. And then we go back and kind of look through them at the end of the week to see what our students are saying, and we can address any group issues that we see or anything else that our students are telling us that's going on for that particular week. And now I will turn it over to my colleague.
Can you go to the next slide, please? So another example that you can use is a rating system where students are asked to rate their teammates and themselves as whether they contributed equally each week or to the overall project. Sometimes I will have students that are quite honest that say they contributed below their fair share. And that's kind of nice that they're honest about that, because if you establish this rapport throughout the semester, they're more likely to be honest about their share. Also gives me an opportunity to understand how the team dynamics worked throughout the semester. You can ask them to rate the interaction with teammates for themselves and teammates, knowledge, skills, and abilities that they had and they perceived that their teammates had, and their overall satisfaction with your team. We also give guidelines to help students decide what rating to give so that it's not necessarily arbitrary and it's not personality based, but that it actually has meaning to the students and to the instructor so that we can improve not only the current semester, but maybe take some lessons away for future classes. And we'll go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So we're going to break you out into breakout rooms now. We're going to give you an opportunity to use Jamboard, which is one of the collaborative tools that we use in our courses. And what we're calling this is a red light, yellow light, green light activity. And we'd like you to discuss in smaller groups of about 4 people each, roughly. What is one practice you want to stop when you think about working with groups in your courses? Yellow light is what is something that you want to learn more or improve in your courses, and what is one practice you want to start is our green light. So I've pasted the link for the Jamboard, and if you want to go ahead and click on that in the chat, we will go ahead and get you into breakout rooms.